Imagine driving your car every single day with the check engine light just blaring red on your dashboard.
Right.
And you know exactly what it means. Like, you know something under the hood is struggling.
Yeah, but you just keep driving.
Exactly. But instead of, pulling over or calling a mechanic, you reach into your glove box, pull out a piece of black electrical tape, and just cover the light up.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Right. You just keep merging onto the highway day after day, week after week, hoping the engine doesn't completely fail while you're commuting to work.
It's terrifying when you put it like that.
It really is. And the crazy thing is, millions of us are doing exactly this right now. But not with our cars. We're doing it with our mental health.
It's a phenomenal analogy because, well, it captures both the awareness of the problem and that active choice to ignore it.
Yeah.
Like we see the warning sign, but the perceived effort of fixing it just feels heavier than the risk of breaking down.
Exactly. And that is our mission for this deep dive today. We are unpacking the heavy and often totally hidden psychological barriers we build against seeking therapy.
The tape over the dashboard light.
The tape, exactly. But we aren't just looking at the problem. We're dissecting how a modern telehealth practice in Georgia Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC, is systematically dismantling those exact roadblocks.
Which is so needed right now.
It really is. And we're grounding this whole conversation in this really poignant, disarming piece of text from them. The text is titled simply, "This is your sign to start healing tonight."
And, the reason that text serves as such a perfect foundation for us is how it immediately establishes a different emotional core.
How so?
Well, for the very first sentence, it directly challenges the cultural conditioning we all sort of marinate in. Society subtly and honestly, often overtly, teaches us to praise the grind.
Oh, yeah, the whole hustle culture thing.
Exactly. We are taught that needing help is a symptom of weakness. That you just need to, push through or tough it out.
Right.
But this text reframes that entirely. It explicitly tells you that reaching out isn't dramatic. It doesn't mean you're broken. It's simply a symptom of being human.
Which brings us to this massive timeline of hesitation that I think everyone listening can probably relate to.
Well, absolutely.
The text refers to this as the quiet internal conversation.
I love that phrase.
Right. It's that tiny voice in your head that whispers, maybe I should talk to someone, or maybe things don't have to feel this incredibly hard forever.
Yeah, that little spark of self-awareness.
Okay, let's unpack this, because here's the wild part. We have that conversation with ourselves for weeks, months, or even years before we ever take a single step.
It's so true.
Why do we do that? Why are we so good at living with the check engine light on? Like, why do we adapt to our own misery?
Well, it's because humans are dangerously adaptable creatures.
Dangerously adaptable.
Yes. I mean, we can normalize almost any level of suffering if it increases incrementally. What happens is that we build up these massive tolerances to our own distress. Think about the sheer amount of mental energy it takes to maintain that piece of black tape over the dashboard light. You're constantly suppressing, ignoring, compartmentalizing.
He's constantly playing defense.
Right. And over time, that suppression becomes your baseline normal. You literally forget what it feels like for the engine to run smoothly.
But the text points out that this years-long quiet suppression isn't bulletproof. Like, it inevitably collides with this highly specific phenomenon. They call it the Friday evening trigger.
Ah, yes. The Friday evening trigger.
When I read that phrase in the source material, I instantly felt seen. I mean, it is so real.
What's fascinating here is that it's a deeply observed psychological reality, but it also has roots in our actual biology and neurochemistry.
Wait, really? Biology?
Oh, yeah. Think about the structure of a standard work week. From Monday morning to Friday afternoon, you are in a constant state of performance.
Okay, yeah.
You're performing competence for your boss. You're performing calmness for your colleagues. Maybe you're performing stability for your children.
You're just always on.
Always. And to sustain that performance, your body is pumping out stress hormones, like cortisol and adrenaline, just to keep you alert and functioning.
Okay, so you're just running on fumes and adrenaline.
Exactly. You are utilizing a whole arsenal of numbing strategies, whether that's doom scrolling, overworking, or just hyperfixating on tasks to get through the day.
So you're essentially holding your breath for 5 days straight.
Precisely. And then Friday evening arrives.
A weekend.
Right. The emails stop. The meetings are over. The official requirement to perform being, quote-unquote, okay, ends.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. What happens biologically is that your cortisol levels finally begin to drop. Your nervous system attempts to shift out of that high alert fight or flight state.
Okay.
But because you've been pushing away your emotional distress all week, the sudden silence in your schedule acts as a vacuum.
Oh, wow. So all that accumulated weight just crashes down on you at once?
Yes, the distractions are gone, the armor drops, and you are involuntarily forced to feel the emotions you've been forcefully pushing aside all week.
That sounds exhausting.
It is an incredibly vulnerable window. The quiet internal conversation suddenly becomes a megaphone.
Right.
And this is exactly when a message like, "This is your sign to start healing tonight," can actually pierce through the noise. It reaches you when you're just too exhausted to keep the tape over the check engine light.
So if you're listening, picture yourself in that exact moment. It's Friday night, the armor is off, and you finally admit, okay, I need to talk to someone.
The activation moment.
Yes, you've hit the activation moment.
Yeah.
But here is where the source text makes a totally fascinating pivot.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
It argues that the moment you actually decide to book a therapy session is rarely a logical decision. It's almost entirely emotional.
Right, in a sudden wave.
Yeah, a wave of clarity or just a day that was so hard you can't take it anymore. And the advice is to book a session right then in that 5-minute window rather than waiting for a quote-unquote better time.
Because that better time is a complete illusion. It simply doesn't exist.
Okay, but if I'm listening to this, I'm probably thinking, wait, I shouldn't book a medical appointment based purely on a fleeting emotional wave.
Sure, it feels wrong.
Right, that feels impulsive. I should think about it. I should make a spreadsheet, look at my budget, carefully evaluate my schedule. Like, why is that logical instinct actually wrong here?
Because you are dealing with what we can call the paradox of logical procrastination.
The paradox of logical procrastination. Okay.
It sounds completely counterintuitive until you understand how the human brain utilizes logic as a highly sophisticated defense mechanism.
Wait, logic is a defense mechanism.
In the context of mental health, absolutely. Your brain perceives vulnerability as a threat.
Yeah.
So when that Friday evening wave of emotion hits and you think, "I need help," your brain immediately steps in to protect you from that terrifying vulnerability
How does it do that?
by using logic to build a massive wall.
Oh, wow. So logic is actually weaponized against us.
Exactly. When you try to approach therapy purely logically, your brain starts building an itinerary of obstacles.
Oh, I do this all the time.
We all do. Your brain says, well, we need to carefully check our out-of-network benefits. And shouldn't we research therapeutic modalities?
Right, like do I need CBT or something else?
Exactly. Do we need cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavior therapy? You overthink it until the task feels absolutely insurmountable. Your brain turns a tiny first step into this massive, unconquerable mountain.
So it's just the ultimate stalling tactic. You convince yourself you're being responsible by delaying, but really you're just putting the tape back over the dashboard light.
Which is exactly why that brief emotional window, that Friday evening exhaustion, is so critical. Emotion doesn't care about your hypothetical spreadsheet.
It just wants relief.
Right. Emotion strips away the overthinking and simply says, I am hurting right now and I need relief.
Wow.
The text is emphasizing that reaching out isn't a commitment to 5 years of intense psychoanalysis. That is the mountain your brain invented.
Yeah, we make it so much bigger than it is.
In reality, reaching out is incredibly small. It's literally just visiting sheettherapy.com. It's just calling 404-832-0102.
We're just scheduling an intake.
Right. It's scheduling a single intake session. It's one conversation to see if the therapist is even a good fit. By acting on the emotional impulse in that 5-minute window, you bypass the paradox of logical procrastination entirely.
That reframing is huge. I mean, it takes the pressure completely off.
It really does.
But okay, let's be real for a second. Even if you ride that emotional wave, even if you decide tonight is the night and you open your laptop, real-world logistics can instantly kill that momentum.
Oh, absolutely. The real world gets in the way.
Right. If you go to a clinic's website and you're hit with, a complicated intake form, 6-month waiting lists, and a location that's 45 minutes away, the window just closes.
The friction is too high.
Exactly.
And that introduces another crucial psychological concept, the friction threshold. In behavioral economics, we see that adding even a tiny amount of logistical friction to a process causes massive drop-offs in human action.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where we need to look at how coping and healing counseling fundamentally shifts the paradigm.
Yes.
We're going to look at how their specific telehealth blueprint actively removes those final practical hurdles. Because if the friction threshold is too high, the Friday evening revelation means absolutely nothing.
Right. It's where the abstract philosophy of accessibility meets the concrete reality of healthcare infrastructure.
So let's talk about how we traditionally view going to therapy. Think about it like a gym membership.
Okay, good analogy.
Let's look at the physics of going to the gym. For most people, the biggest hurdle to working out isn't the physical act of lifting the dumbbell or running on the treadmill.
No, it's getting there.
Exactly. The true hurdle is the activation energy required just to get there. It's packing your gym bag, it's the 30-minute commute in rush hour traffic.
Circling for parking.
Yes, circling a crowded lot, and
Huh?
then it's walking into an intimidating locker room where you feel awkward and judged before you even lace up your shoes.
In chemistry, activation energy is the minimum amount of energy required to start a reaction.
Right.
Logistically, if you make a task just 10% harder to initiate, it requires 50% more mental fuel to actually do it.
Wow. And traditional therapy has a massive commute and a highly intimidating locker room.
It really does.
You have to drive across town, sit in a sterile public waiting room, awkwardly flip through a magazine, and just hope you don't make eye contact with your neighbor.
Which is terrifying for a lot of people.
Completely. But the telehealth model that CHC uses entirely removes the commute and the locker room of mental health.
It zeroes out the activation energy.
You don't need it. You literally open a laptop in your living room and your session begins. It's a 100% high-pay compliant platform, so privacy is absolute. A session is exactly 50 minutes from your couch.
But, the removal of the physical commute is only half the equation here.
What's the other half?
We have to address the financial friction,
Hmm.
which is arguably the highest barrier of all.
Yes, because for a lot of people, therapy is viewed as a luxury good.
Right, like a privilege.
It's treated like a spa day for the mind, reserved only for those with disposable income. And this is where the specifics of the CHC source text are not just informative, but genuinely crucial.
Well, think about it. When a person is sitting there on a Friday night, emotionally vulnerable and ready to ask for help, discovering a $200 out-of-network fee doesn't just annoy them.
No, it shuts them down.
It triggers a literal physiological flight response. The brain says, danger, we cannot afford this threat to our resources, and they just close the tab.
But CHC actually dismantles that financial flight response entirely.
How do they do that?
They accept Medicaid, which means a $0 copay for those patients.
Wow, zero.
Let me say that again, free. And for commercial insurance, they accept major providers like Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Humana.
That covers a lot of people.
It does. And with those, the out-of-pocket cost is usually just between $10 and $40 a session.
That's incredible.
They are systematically lowering the friction threshold so that when you have that emotional impulse to get help, your bank account doesn't veto the decision.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we really must connect this financial and logistical accessibility to the broader geographical reality.
Oh, geography is huge.
The source text highlights that CHC serves all 159 counties in Georgia. We really need to pause and understand the psychological weight of that.
Right, because geography dictates destiny for so many people's healthcare.
Historically, yes. If you live in a major metropolitan hub, you might have hundreds of clinics to choose from.
Sure.
But if you live in a rural county, your options are severely limited. There might be exactly one mental health clinic in your entire town.
And if there's only one clinic, everyone in town knows exactly whose car is parked out front on a Tuesday afternoon.
Precisely. The local stigma in a tight-knit community can act as an impenetrable wall.
You'd rather suffer in silence than have the neighbors talk.
Exactly. Or, beyond stigma, perhaps that single local clinic doesn't have a therapist who understands your specific cultural background or your specific family dynamics.
That's a great point.
What CHT does, by covering the entire state digitally, is a massive democratization of access.
Democratization of access. I like that.
They have a diverse, culturally competent team of over 15 licensed professionals.
Wow, 15?
Over 15. Whether you need a licensed clinical social worker, a family therapist, or a licensed professional counselor,
Yeah.
they have the scope.
And they treat a huge range of things, right?
They handle everything from anxiety and depression to trauma, PTSD, grief, and relationship stress. And they do this for individuals, couples, families, and teens 13 and up. Plus, they offer life coaching, and they have same-week availability.
So your zip code literally no longer dictates the quality of your care.
Not at all.
It doesn't dictate your privacy, and it doesn't dictate how long you have to sit on a waiting list. It neutralizes the geographical stigma overnight.
It's a game changer.
You can just send an email to support@shittherapy.com from your phone while still in your sweatpants and have a 50-minute session locked in for Tuesday. No driving, no waiting rooms, no fear of running into your coworker in the parking lot.
They have built a completely frictionless runway for that moment of vulnerability.
They really have. But, as we look at this whole journey from recognizing the quiet internal conversation to catching the Friday evening trigger, bypassing the paradox of logical procrastination, and finally using telehealth to eliminate those physical and financial hurdles, we arrive at what is arguably the most profound point in the entire source material.
Oh, the philosophical takeaway.
Yes, it's a purely philosophical takeaway. It's about redefining our own internal threshold for deserving help.
This is truly the crux of the entire issue. It is the final boss of psychological barriers.
The text lays this out with such unbelievable clarity. It explicitly states that you do not need to be in an active crisis to deserve support.
That is so important to hear.
You do not need a quote-unquote good enough reason to sit on a therapist's couch. And you definitely shouldn't wait until your life is actively falling apart to justify making the call.
Right.
The actual valid threshold for seeking therapy is simply this. This is hard, and I'd like help.
Simple as that.
That's it, nothing more. So what does this all mean? How do we actually internalize that? How do we unlearn this toxic societal idea that our lives have to be completely in shambles before we're allowed to ask for help?
Well, we unlearn it by actively granting ourselves the permission to be human.
The permission to be human.
Yes. And by actively fighting back against the culture of comparison.
Oh, the comparison game is brutal.
We live in a society that demands the pain. We constantly compare our pain to others. We tell ourselves, well, my job is really stressing me out and I'm not sleeping, but, my friend is going through a devastating divorce, so I shouldn't complain. I don't really need therapy.
We gatekeep our own healing.
Exactly. We gatekeep our own healing because we have this false narrative that we haven't suffered enough to earn a seat in the therapist's office.
Like it's a prize we have to win through misery.
Right. We view therapy exclusively as an emergency room for the mind, rather than recognizing it as preventative care.
Oh, that's such a good distinction.
Think about physical health. You do not wait until you are having a massive heart attack to start thinking about your diet or going for a walk.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. You practice preventative care. Yet, with our mental health, we refuse to learn coping mechanisms until we are in the middle of a total psychological breakdown.
We wait for the engine to blow up on the highway instead of fixing the check engine light when it first comes on.
Yes. And the most liberating, profound realization a person can have is that the phrase, "this is hard," is a complete sentence.
A complete sentence.
It is a fully valid, standalone statement of your reality. It requires no further justification. It requires no comparative analysis against your neighbor's trauma. And it absolutely does not require an active crisis to legitimize it.
This is hard is a complete sentence. I want everyone listening to just let that sink in for a second.
It's powerful.
It strips away all the ego. It strips away all the guilt we carry for simply feeling overwhelmed by our own lives.
It gives you permission.
It does. So if you are listening to this right now, look at the map we've just laid out today. We started by acknowledging that quiet, persistent, internal conversation.
The dashboard light.
The dashboard light you might have been putting electrical tape over for months or even years. We looked at the biology of the Friday evening trigger, that moment when the performance of the work weekends, the stress hormones drop, and the armor finally falls off.
The vulnerable window.
Right. We talked about why you shouldn't let your brain trick you into logical procrastination, and why acting in that brief 5-minute window of emotional clarity is actually the smartest thing you can possibly do.
And we examined how modern infrastructure finally supports that action.
Yes.
By utilizing CHC's telehealth model, you completely bypass the activation energy of a commute, the intimidation of a waiting room, and the financial flight response of exorbitant out-of-network fees.
And most importantly, we established the ultimate truth. You do not need a 5-alarm fire in your life to justify reaching out for a bucket of water.
Exactly.
You don't need a crisis to deserve a conversation.
This raises an important question, which leaves us with one final, unavoidable reality.
What's that?
If the logistical barriers of cost, time, and geography are genuinely gone, and if the threshold for deserving help is simply wanting it, then the only thing left keeping someone frozen is their own hesitation.
And that is exactly what we want to leave you with today. We want to leave you with a thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. If the very first step to healing is literally just a 5-minute task, visiting a website or making a quick phone call with zero lifetime commitment, and you now know fundamentally that you don't need a crisis to justify taking that step,
Uh,
what exactly does that better time you were waiting for actually look like?